just joining and tuning in, this is the Amendment 3 virtual town hall brought to you by the Suncoast chapter of NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. I'm going to start out by introducing myself. My name is Christopher Cano. I'm the executive director of the Suncoast chapter of NORML. And of course, to my right is our sound engineer, deputy director, and all around great guy, Carlos Hermida. He has 1,000,001 titles and he's doing 1,000,001 things right now, between just making sure that we're live streaming over multiple platforms, making sure that all of our partners have joined us backstage and they're streaming over their platforms. I do want to say a very special thank you to all of our partners who are going to be joining us this evening, including the Florida Cannabis Action Network, Minorities for Medical Marijuana, of course, medical marijuana and wellness webinars, and we'll be joined shortly by some candidates for office and the folks from the Yes on 3 campaign. So we are live right now, broadcasting and streaming across multiple channels. Maybe you're watching us on YouTube. If you are, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on the Suncoast NORML YouTube, if you're on Facebook, by all means, please go ahead and hit that like and follow us. And maybe you're on one of our partner networks. I urge you to also hit like and subscribe to our partner networks of the Florida Cannabis Action Network and Minorities for Medical Marijuana, making sure that folks have all the following necessary so they can continue to give you these amazing events and latest news. Of course, tonight we're going to be talking about the November ballot initiative known as Amendment 3, which is currently being sponsored by the Smart and Safe Florida PAC, which is raising money to ensure that Florida has an adult use program for those adults 21 and up. Now, Florida currently has a medical marijuana program. Some of you may be medical marijuana patients and you have questions this evening. I want you to know that this, of course, is free and open to the public. Anyone can join on the various social media channels, can make comments and participate. So if you have comments that you want to leave, by all means, feel free. We always encourage folks to be nice and respectful. But if you got something that you feel, some way about and you want to get it off your chest, by all means. But again, please just, let's hold normal decorum. If you have questions, we are going to have a question and answer period for the last 30 minutes of the program. So if you do have a question, please type it or make the comment of your question, and then we can go ahead and make sure that we field that for later among our various guests and folks that are going to be subject matter experts tonight on discussing the medical marijuana program in Florida and our future adult use program should Amendment 3 pass. Now, we also have some very special guests that have joined us, and you may see them in their little windows. Much of this program is going to be similar to what you might watch on a news program with the various talking heads in the boxes. But I do want to say and introduce our political director, Gary Stein. Gary, say hello to the folks watching at home.
Good evening. It's nice to see you all at nighttime when it's sunny and it's not raining buckets like it has been for the last. And we are so excited to on the ballot this year that can make a difference. We hope. We're going to go over it. We're going to discuss it. In fact, what I'd like to do as we get started right here is just read the ballot summary, so we can get started on that. Here's what it says. The ballot summary is as follows. This is what you will see on your ballot. Allows adults 21 years or older, that's not children, to possess, purchase, or use marijuana products and marijuana accessories for non-medical personal consumption by smoking, ingestion, or otherwise. Allows medical marijuana treatment centers and other state licensed entities to acquire, cultivate, process, manufacture, sell, and distribute such products and accessories, and applies to Florida law, does not change or immunize violations of federal law, and establishes possession limits for personal use, and allows consistent legislation, defines terms, and provides an effective date. So we're going to go over each one of those little individual pieces and see what exactly that's going to mean to you, because it's written in legalese pretty much. The average voter may or may not understand that. So we hope to give you the information that you need tonight so you can explain to the best person you know why they should vote or not vote for it. Let's get educated.
Gary, thank you for that introduction and of course, discussing what the amendment says and what folks are going to look at on the ballot. You know, I know folks have a lot of questions about what the amendment does and doesn't do, but before we really dive into that, I do want to introduce our other partners. Next, I'm going to introduce our partners from Minorities for Medical Marijuana, who have been with us throughout this fight in the state of Florida to make sure that our patients have safe and affordable access to quality medicine. And Roz, why don't you go ahead and let folks know who you are and what you got going on? And you might have that mute button on, so go ahead and hit that.
That's my bad. Sorry, Ross. Go
That's
ahead.
All right,
Carlos.
let me in. Listen, I'm so happy to be with you tonight. Thank you for inviting me, Chris and Carlos. I'm Roz McCarthy, founder and CEO of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. The organization is a nonprofit 501c3 that has a national reach, but we are located right here in the heart of Orlando, Florida. And I started this organization in 2016. Prior to the medical program being voted yes on, I felt like it was important to create a organization that it was focused on the issues that are very important to minority communities related to social justice, social equity, public policy, as well as economic opportunities, right? And so we are very excited about this conversation tonight. And I will tell you that we do, even though it's Minorities for Medical Marijuana, we do support legalization in the state of Florida. So I'm excited for the conversation, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ross. We appreciate you joining us this evening, and we appreciate your continued partnership and advocating for the patients of the state of Florida. Our next partner organization has been advocating for Florida's patients for several decades now in this state, and I want to introduce their leader, Jody James. Jody, how you doing this evening?
I am fabulous. Thank you very much for allowing me to represent Florida Cannabis Action Network here tonight. I'm actually at the Space Coast Convention Center, that's Brevard County, where we're representing the Yes on 3 campaign at a hobnob. So lots of candidates here talking about what's important to them. And of course, giving Florida Cannabis Action Network an opportunity to talk about why we have been advocating for adult therapeutic and non-therapeutic use for more than 25 years in the state of Florida. Roz mentioned that they're a 501c3. We're not. When we were founded in 1998, our lawyers told us that the First Amendment would guarantee us the right to protect our membership. And that was really important back then because it was still basically, it was a crime for everyone to use cannabis back then. And we wanted to make sure that we could protect people. I will tell you that while I am absolutely yes on 3 and the organization is taking a yes on 3 stance, not everyone who is a member of Florida Cannabis Action Network supports yes on 3. And so we're really trying to be very respectful of one another as we weave through this. And we're really grateful to participate and hear people from both sides of the aisle.
Well, Jody, thank you for that. And we understand being a membership-based organization, the will of the members oftentimes, especially in any democracy, there's debate, there's a challenge to come to consensus. What we hope this evening for those of you who are watching at home is that you'll get the facts of what Amendment 3 does and what it doesn't do. And for those of you who may feel as though there may be shortcomings around the amendment, also to explain the fact that many of the shortcomings have very little to do with the amendment itself, but our own political system in the state of Florida. And then that's why some of the things that folks have asked about or said about this amendment, we can definitely address in more detail. We also have a special guest joining this evening who has been on our show, The Rotation, which comes each and every Sunday at 11 a.m. To tell the folks the latest in cannabis news and entertainment. And we have been featuring several candidates for office. And I want to introduce Teresa Wakefield Gamble, who is a candidate for Florida State House in District 14, which is up near the Jacksonville area. Teresa, welcome to the town hall this evening. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the invitation. This is a very important issue. I love hearing what Roz and Jody had to say. I just want to let the ladies know you do have an ally in me, so I'm all in for it because it's a personal journey for me. Being prescribed 25 different opioids over 10 years ago, it was killing me slowly. So I had to seek and look for a lot other alternatives. And a lot of times, as an African American woman, it's hard to get that. We have to jump through so many hoops and red tape. So this bill and this amendment is very important. I am voting yes. I am telling all my constituents to vote yes, and why they need to vote yes. It's not just for medical reasons, it's also for our quality of life, making sure they can be able to be decriminalized. In other words, clean up their records so they can earn a livable wage, and to be able to use the revenue from cannabis to expand Medicaid so everyone can get health care coverage. So I am truly honored, super excited of being on the show, and I'm ready to get in the conversation and ready to do the work. So make sure you vote for me on August 20th if you know someone in the Duval County, Jacksonville, Florida area in House District 14.
And you can go back and watch our past episode on our YouTube channel, of course, youtube.com/at Suncoast NORML, and check out the episode with Teresa on there. Gary Carlos go very much in depth in her campaign, her stances, but most importantly, in understanding our political process in the state, we the voters vote on constitutional amendments, but then it falls into the purview of the Florida legislature to enact what the voters' will is, which often means passing statutes that make sure that the amendment and all the things that aren't necessarily in the very narrow description, which Gary read to you, which has to be 75 words or less by law, gets filled out. And so we're going to need allies in the Florida legislature to actually enact the amendment properly. And so I want to start by going back and giving folks a bit of history of how we got to this point. And I want to be very clear of how we got there, who were the major players, and where we are going forward. So that way you, the voters, can understand that journey and that process. And then that way you can make an informed decision this November when it comes to voting for Amendment 3. First thing, Florida has been one of the prohibition states in the Deep South for a very long time. As a matter of fact, Florida has some of the harshest and most draconian possession laws when it comes to marijuana in the country. As a matter of fact, right now in Florida, if you're not a medical patient and you do get stopped with marijuana, having 20 grams or more is a felony. If you were to get stopped with a vape pen or a edible or any amount of concentrate, it is a felony. And in Florida, you can face up to 5 years in prison with those felony charges. Obviously, you would lose your right to vote. There's a number of things that come with being a felon in the state of Florida, and again, with what's happening in this state, even in the most recent statistics, we see that over 66,000 people in 2022 were arrested for marijuana possession. Marijuana arrests are over 1/3 of all of arrests in the state of Florida. And Amendment 3 is going to change those possession limits. As Gary touched on earlier, we're looking at right now, if you have 20 grams or more being a felony, the possession limits are going to change to 3 ounces of flour or less, essentially being decriminalized, and up to 5 grams of concentrate or less being decriminalized. So these felony arrests that we're seeing for the vast majority of folks that get them in Florida for possession will disappear. We should see the vast majority of folks arrest for simple possession in the state of Florida disappear. And so that is one key thing as to why NORML chose to support Amendment 3. It's one of the reasons why we chose to put this town hall together, so folks can understand that for all the shortcomings that we feel this amendment may have, and we're going to go into detail those later, we do believe that ending arrest and protecting marijuana consumers from arrest have always been part of our mission and what we continue to want to advocate for as a national organization for the reform of marijuana laws. Now, going back to history, in 2014, the canna moms and mothers who had sick children, as well as the Florida Cannabis Action Network and Kathy Jordan and a group of folks who needed cannabis medically, were advocating for the Florida legislature to adopt a low THC, high CBD program for medical marijuana in the state, and it passed through the state legislature. And the way the legislature originally set that up, only 5 organizations, they were planning on one of each region. They're going to divide up the state in 5 regions. We're going to be allowed to essentially cultivate, produce, and sell this low THC medical marijuana. Now, the problem with that is that you had to have a nursery license for 30 contiguous years in the state of Florida. You had to be able to put up a $60,000 non-refundable application fee and put up a several $1,000,000 performance bond in order to even really get in the running for that, which automatically, in many cases, pushed out small business owners, mom and pop style shops that we saw in many of the other legal states that have jumped on this green rush when it comes to legalization. Now, there were some problems with, of course, those requirements. One of the big ones, and Roz, I'll go to you for this to talk a little bit about, was the fact that African Americans, Black folks in Florida, due to Jim Crow laws and discrimination, couldn't get nursery licenses in some cases. So, Roz, just want to go to you a little quick and just inform the voters a little bit more of what's the whole deal with the Pickford class and how we came about as to why the initial setup for medical marijuana in Florida was essentially unconstitutional and discriminatory.
Right. Well, there was many parts of the initial regulatory framework that lawmakers were working on that made it unconstitutional and basically made it really made it a hard hill to climb for African American farmers and business owners. And so, working with people like Senator Rouson, working with, with so many different representatives at the time, Representative Chevron Jones, we laid a lot of attention on the Black farmer and the fact that first, to have a requirement you have to be a 30-year nurseryman was totally, it was totally discriminatory, because being a nurseryman meant that you had to be recognized for 30 years, and most farmers and Black farmers didn't have that opportunity to be recognized as a business owner and farmer for 30 years. So unfortunately, that piece of the requirement in order to get a license was thrown out eventually. The issue was, after that, was how do we get more Black farmers involved in being able to participate? And so the Pickford Black farmer opportunity, it was, it was on one side, it was great of being able to create an opportunity, but why does there have to just be one farmer? Why does it just have to be one Pickford farmer that gets that opportunity? The Pickford farmer was basically in around 89, 92, there was a lawsuit, the USDA versus Pickford Glickman. And basically it was a suit against the United States saying that there were practices that were discriminatory towards Black farmers. And so that lawsuit ended up being a multi-billion-dollar winning for those farmers that were a part of that class action lawsuit. And so the state of Florida wanted to recognize those farmers that are in Florida and say, hey, we're going to create an opportunity for you to also apply for a license. But that opportunity, it took almost 5 years for that opportunity to even manifest itself. So my prayer is, and my goal is to make sure, if we're going to go out and want to create an opportunity for Black business owners, Black farmers, small business owners, that the regulatory infrastructure that will support that happens after we pass yes on 3. After we say yes on legalization, we go to work working with our lawmakers to make sure that there is ample opportunity for small, mid, large, and also minority-owned businesses to participate, to thrive, and not to have fees that are going to make it so hard and raise the barrier from an economic standpoint.
Thank you, Roz. Now, Gary, when we, essentially started with this whole low THC program, again, we started with these 5 folks initially got licenses and other businesses sued. So tell us a little bit about how that journey came about. Right now we're up to 23 licensees, and I believe 18 have storefronts. But tell the folks watching at home a little bit of the history, how we went from 5 to the current 23.
Well, first off, I should mention the fact that the applications that were put out for those initial first 5 are the only applications that have actually resulted in licenses. And that was back in 2015, which itself is egregious. But the fact is, those other people got their licenses because of the fact that the application process was so screwed up. They set it up where they weren't being scored properly. They're just being ranked. And that didn't work out properly. And so a legislative law judge came in and gave those licenses to those people who were screwed out of their licenses because of the way that the application process was put together. And after that, we ended up having Ron DeSantis actually giving out the rest of the licenses to everybody. So the worst applications of people who are still able to produce were able to get licenses. And of course, what happens when you have a license that you really can't use? You sell it. And that is what has happened to nearly all the licenses, actually, that were given out, with only a very few still being the original licenses. The rest of them have been sold to multi-state organizations or to other organizations that had the millions of dollars to be able to put into it. And some people just sold paper licenses, not any infrastructure whatsoever. So people had to put all that money into it. So the whole process itself has been screwed up. And again, no licenses have been given out since the original applications in 2015. And that includes the Pigford license, which of course has been held up again because of court battles. First off, because the person who actually won the actual license passed away before they had actually had a chance to get the license. And they had to go to the courts to say, this belongs to the kids of the people, of the person who won it. That is still being debated. In the meantime, the person who did get the license has made no bones about the fact that
They're selling.
they're selling that license, and it may not necessarily have to be a person of minority status. And so therefore, this once again has been a good idea that was messed up by the legislature. So we have to be guiding our legislature as best we can as grassroots organizations and help them learn how to put this right, because so far it hasn't been.
Well, Gary, I'm glad you touched on grassroots organizations. I want to go to Jody from the Florida Cannabis Action Network, because Jody, if I'm not mistaken, the way the original amendment initiative was written, and some of the THC, low THC and such, and Amendment 2, which later was adopted in 2016 for medical marijuana, was for every 100,000 patients, they're supposed to issue out more licenses. So Jody, could you share with us a little bit about how many patients we have in Florida? So if I'm not mistaken, we have one of the largest patient counts in the country.
We're well over 800,000 patients, and that's why we're waiting on 22 more licenses. We actually have done the math, and by the time the next 22 licenses have been given out, we'll be eligible for 4 more. So for every 100,000 patients, we are supposed to get 4 new licenses. And the idea is about accessibility and affordability. So Florida Cannabis Action Network is really we actually started looking at whether or not it was a good idea to sue the state not issuing those licenses. Those 22 licenses that haven't been issued, the application period ended last April, and I don't mean April of 24, I mean April of 23. And so since April of 2023, there's 800,000 patients who are missing 22 licenses. And again, they belong to the patient, because it's about accessibility and affordability. So those licenses not being issued means that there's a whole lot less supply, and less supply means they can charge higher prices. So we are still waiting. Now, that's something that was written into law. That is not something that was in that original constitutional amendment. And you guys touched on the idea earlier that implementation is so important. And so I'm really glad to see our candidate, it's Teresa. I'm really glad to see our candidate here, because implementation is everything. What happens after Amendment 3 passes? And I will remind people that we didn't start with a constitutional amendment to legalize marijuana. We have had members of the Florida legislature who have been introducing bills that would have legalized marijuana for adults, that would have done a lot of the things that we all want to see happen. And they could have done it through the legislature. But the governor and the leadership in the Florida House and Senate has had a zero tolerance for legalization, and they have stood between people and safe access to this plant for as long as I've been working on this in Florida. And Amendment 3 gives us an opportunity to clearly state to the Florida legislature that we want adults to have safe, affordable, non-medical access to cannabis.
Well, thank you, Jody, and we appreciate all the hard work that Florida Cannabis Action Network has done over the years to trailblaze to get us to this point. Teresa, I wanted to go to you next because, as it's been touched on, we're going to need allies in the Florida legislature who can properly implement this. And from what I understand, in your own family's background, is that you come from a family of Black farmers. So this is a issue that's near and dear to you. So could you share with us a little bit about your own family's journey and how you feel as moving forward that the Florida legislature should address implementation of Amendment 3?
That's great, Chris. Yes, my grandfather, he was a black farmer, and then in Georgia, Southeast Georgia, and then when my mom and my father moved to Florida, my mother continued the tradition. So I learned about farming from my grandfather and my mother, and it's very important to learn that trade and that skill. So I'm like, Ross, how in the world individuals got to justify they was a 30-year nursery worker when basically almost every black farmer had their hands on farming since slavery. So that alone will qualify a black farmer to be able to grow cannabis. Right now, my grandfather's farm is still in existence in Georgia. Matter of fact, it's the only one with the barn and everything still up. And I'm working with my uncle. We're talking behind the scenes, who's the estate executor now, to try to get it a historical landmark so nothing happens to it. So my grandchildren and children can see where their roots come from. And the reason it's so important for me here in Jacksonville, because we have black farmers in Jacksonville. We have farmers that producers. Matter of fact, on Saturday, I was out at the farmers market talking with the farmers and their frustration of having to get access to opportunities and grant funding is not just at the state level, but at the local level. But a lot of them don't have all the information in order for them to pursue to be put themselves in a position of success. And I agree with Jody. Legislation play a critical role to make sure we get this right. And I'm the type of individual with the work ethic of a granddaughter of a black farmer, a dad who was a union worker, along with my husband. I don't mind rolling up my sleeves and doing the work and pushing back on a lot of this stuff because it's time out for it being dragged out. I had constituents tell me that they have individuals passing out legislation convincing them to vote no on 3. And this is why I had to really step up the volume and advocate for this, that they using language to confuse people, even though a 75 word count what Gary read, but they're taking those 75 words and put a negative stigmatization on Amendment 3 instead of the positive representation that's needed for Amendment 3. And those individuals, those 800 patients that are waiting, that is something that every candidate should be fighting and pushing for, because these individuals still have to work, they still have to provide for their family, they still have to be a caregiver. Some of these are young people and some of these are children that suffer and miss so much time out of school, or they can't focus and concentrate. And if cannabis can help them benefit to improve their quality of life, then everybody needs to be sounding the horn and calling everybody, blowing up Ron DeSantis and let him know that the Democrats are coming to take control of the House and the Senate. So he might as well get ready and get that pen ready and sign these bills for cannabis, because we're not gonna stop until this has happened, because we shouldn't be struggling. All of us pay too much taxes to be struggling. So yes, Tris, this is very passionate for me personally as a granddaughter of a black farmer and also an advocate for black owned businesses, because I'm an entrepreneur myself. And it's time for us to be ignored when possibly we're the ones that got the solutions to the problems our state is going through with. So we're not just want to sit at the table. We want to do the work.
Well, thank you, Teresa, for your passion, and thank you for stepping up to run for office in a crucial district. I think it's important that we have more legislators who are willing to step up and one get a grasp of the true issues that patients face in this state, and two, that have some skin in the game, in the sense that they come from backgrounds that they understand. The folks don't always get a fair shake in the way that the system has been designed. And I want to talk a little bit more about that because as we transitioned from a low THC program in Florida to passing Amendment 2 in 2016 with close to over 70% of the vote. That was historic in a lot of ways. And it took a lot of money. John Morgan was definitely someone who was a major donor that came in and donated. Of course, there were small dollar donations from around the state. I myself worked for I think $400 every 2 weeks, 16-hour days, 7 days a week, collected petitions in 2015 to put it on the ballot. I mean, I remember being on the west coast of Florida, traveling 7, 8 counties, going to different places, whether it's shops like this one here at Chillum and Ybor, or throughout the entire state, from volunteers who wanted to see medical marijuana a reality. For me, my own personal journey with this was that my father was diagnosed with a terminal form of dementia in 2010, and he was told he was had probably 6 months. By 2014, because of the care that my mother had given him, he actually was still with us, and even though he was bedridden, he was fighting for his life. And when I discovered that the U.S. government had a patent to use medical cannabis, use cannabis oil to treat the symptoms of these oxidative diseases like dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, what my dad was suffering from, that to mitigate the strokes that he was having, I knew that I had to do something to try and save him. And one night after I had got the medicine for him, because at the time there was no legal market, I had to go to an illicit market to get high THC cannabis and make our own oil at home. I got arrested. And I can tell you that it wasn't a felony amount, but I was hit with felony charges. And felony charges in Florida to the consumer can cost someone anywhere upwards of $10,000 to $15,000 in legal fees, in rehabilitation fees for first time offenders who get pretrial intervention. But if you're not someone with a clean record, the system is going to be stacked against you. You may not get pretrial intervention. You may not get the opportunity to go before a judge and tell them that you have an addiction and you need some help, and get your record expunged. You're going to wind up facing the full power of the Florida's judicial system. And again, that can wind you up with a felony charges, strip you of your civil rights, have you in prison upwards of 5 years. And we've seen our partners at the Last Prisoner Project. They have been advocating for the release of cannabis prisoners in other states where prohibition is continues to be a major issue, where they don't even have medical programs. There are people that are sitting in jail for decades, and it is not right for that to continue. Now, the voters, when they voted on Amendment 2 back in 2016, for many thought that they were going to get whole plant access. And Joe Redner, who is a local Tampa celebrity, if you will, and business owner, sued the state for the right to whole plant access. And actually, the Florida Supreme Court came down against him in the grand scheme of things, even though lower courts did say that he should have that right. So we still stand today without the right to grow our own cannabis. Now, people have said, and Teresa brought it up in her last comments, was that people are saying, "Oh, you shouldn't vote for Amendment 3 because it doesn't have home grow." The fact is that the Florida legislature failed to do that. They failed to implement a home grow statute when they passed Amendment 3. They failed to fix it once they saw the lawsuits happening. And so, again, there is a lack of political will to do what's necessary to put the patients first in many cases in this state. And Carlos, I know you're a man of a few words. You're not a political person, but you're a medical marijuana patient yourself. How do you feel about the fact that your buddies in other states can grow it, and you can't? How do you feel about medical patients not having the access that they need?
It absolutely infuriates me. I can't stand it. I think it's the most hypocritical thing in the world, where I can brew my own beer in my garage, and I can't grow a plant in my backyard. That's the strangest thing to me.
So here we are now, today. We have seen shortcomings in the system. I can tell you that Suncoast NORML and the Florida Cannabis Action Network, Minorities for Medical Marijuana, we've been advocating for different legislative fixes to the current medical marijuana system. For us, we have advocated at Suncoast NORML for workers' protections. We see every single year public employees, whether they be firefighters, correction officers, school teachers, school administrators, getting fired from their jobs, and they're legit medical marijuana patients. We've seen professionals have their professional licenses put in jeopardy, whether they're some type of counselor or psychologist or psychiatrist, because they're medical marijuana patients. There are chronic debilitating conditions that exist that people have legitimate reasons for accessing medical marijuana for. And even though they do everything right by the law and by the state, they're still denied that access in many ways. And for those of you who are gun owners, this is a major issue right now. I know that the previous agricultural commissioner, Nikki Fried, actually, because the commissioner of agriculture in this state handles concealed weapons permits, chose to sue the federal government over the current status of, essentially saying that, well, because marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug, you don't have any type of constitutional right to possess that and your firearm at the same time. And the Constitution is very clear. The Supreme Court has ruled many times that our right to arms shall not be infringed upon. And we still see the state of Florida and many other states infringing upon that Second Amendment right. It doesn't make sense that you can't protect your family and protect yourself and be a medical marijuana patient, especially considering that this is a medicine that people want. And in some cases, people will break in your house to steal it, especially if they knew you were gone. So,
So the gun, if
Jody, I want to go to you because I know that
yeah,
Florida Cannabis Action Network plaintiffs in this case. So we'll
are.
go ahead and go to you next, Jody. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with the issue of guns and medical cannabis patients.
Well, I'll tell you what, that has been a fascinating space to be in. Right now, we are at the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. That's the Atlanta court, the jurisdiction that covers Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. And the federal government, of course, we had to sue the Biden administration and the U.S. Justice Department over what ends up being that box that you have to check on a form if you buy a gun from a licensed firearm dealer. Because really, it comes into play when you sign that form to buy a new firearm, and it comes into play if you were to be arrested in possession of a firearm, right? If you're not arrested in possession and you're not Hunter Biden writing a book about being on drugs, probably no one will ever know. But literally, the U.S. Justice Department has stated that we are derelicts, that patients are derelicts, patients are too crazy to use cannabis or to carry a gun because cannabis causes psychosis. So it has been fascinating to watch how that has proceeded. And even now, as the Biden administration is looking at removing cannabis from Schedule 1 and rescheduling it to 3, that debate is still going on about whether or not we're going to be allowed our firearm rights. So even if Amendment 3 passes, or if you vote no, which I hope you won't, that's not going to affect your firearms. We're going to continue to fight that battle, just like we're going to continue to fight the home grow battle, just like we're going to continue to join Suncoast NORML in the employment battle. So while Amendment 3 may not fix everything, Amendment 3 is going to allow adults to possess 3 ounces of cannabis and 5 grams of concentrate, and we're going to be able to go to the Florida legislature once it passes and figure out how to implement it. So we got to have your yes vote.
Well, thank you, Jody. We appreciate you giving us that update. Gary, I want to go to you next because I know you had a comment about the issue of guns and cannabis, and also the legislation that we've been advocating for to address the shortcomings of the existing system. And then after that, we're going to move forward from this little history lesson that we spent essentially the last 40 minutes on and dive into Amendment 3. So, Gary, I want to go to you next.
Well, first off, I should say that Chris and I wrote a very good bill that makes certain that using cannabis does not affect your ability to have your Second Amendment rights. And that's basically the way it is. Just get rid of that damn box in the first place, because it is legal in the state of Florida. So therefore, it's not officially illicit. Although you're forced to actually check off that thing. Do you use any illicit drugs? Well, federally, it's illicit. Statewide, it's not. So let's go ahead and put in a statewide amendment to help out with the amendment for the Second Amendment. The other thing I wanted to make a mention for was something that Jody had mentioned earlier. We have 800,000 patients right now, more than 800,000. And the way that the bill was written in 2017, it allows for a certain number of new licenses to come up for every 100,000 patients. However, this is one of the possible downsides to Amendment 3 that we should discuss, because it is a downside. And that is that if people are allowed to have access to adult use cannabis, they might just drop their medical cards and no longer stay qualified patients, and that number will go down, which would allow the state legislature, if they want to use the laws as they're currently written, to reduce the amount of licenses given out.
Wow,
And that is something that needs to be considered.
Yeah, that's a great point, Gary. And this is something that is a major concern for us, because what we saw in other states when they transition from medical to adult use is that oftentimes the medical system suffers in the sense that it no longer becomes a focus. As a matter of fact, in the state of Washington State, they actually did away with having a medical system altogether. It's just one giant adult use system. It took many years. They're still fighting for home grow. So there are other lessons from other states that Florida can make sure they don't do those things. Matter of fact, when I was in my master's program at the University of South Florida, that was the whole point of my thesis, was examining what other states are doing well, what they're doing not well, and making sure Florida doesn't make those same mistakes, making sure that Florida gets it right. And vertical integration is definitely something that, with the way they've written the laws, they're not going to add more businesses to the market if the patient counts go down, or they adjust the way they are. So breaking up vertical integration is definitely something that we need to see from our legislative allies happen in order for Amendment 3 to be successful, in order for the medical marijuana system to continue to be successful. And I know that Amendment 3 has a small caveat in there, where a line that says essentially the legislature can license other businesses. And so there's this big fight recently, and I want to give folks, since we've done with this history, to go on to current events, in that Ron DeSantis has come out very hard against Amendment 3. He's even got some billionaire donors donating several $1,000,000 to try and defeat it. And you have to ask yourself why. And he's even trying to drive this artificial wedge between the hemp industry and essentially marijuana consumers to try and defeat Amendment 3. All in all, we believe that there is space for a robust medical marijuana system, a robust adult use system, and for hemp businesses to thrive in the state of Florida. And we want to see everybody get their fair shake when it comes down to it. Ron DeSantis and his allies in the Florida legislature for the past 2 sessions, and Carlos, you've been a hemp business owner for several years now. I mean, how often do you see DeSantis and his allies cracking down on you? It feels like we're going up there every single year trying to stop them from passing some bad bill that's going to hurt your business and fellow other hemp businesses, right?
And we're not the only ones that are suffering too. Like, this guy has there's several other lobbies. For example, we were up there before the hemp bill came out, and we weren't just advocating for the bills that you and Gary put together. And I had some legislators saying I have to focus on gun rights. They're about to make it so that anybody can have a gun anywhere in Florida, and I can't focus on marijuana right now. So there's a lot going on up there, and there's a lot of shady shit.
Well,
shady stuff.
Well, I mean, you put a fine point on it, in the sense that I want to say that many of these issues that we're seeing, that Ron DeSantis is saying that he's a champion on, and we even saw his Attorney General Ashley Moody argue before the Florida Supreme Court. We've been arguing as a consumer advocacy organization for many years, and now all of a sudden they're acting like they're allies, but they're not. They're not allies to marijuana consumers. They're not allies to the hemp industry. It does feel like his veto of that recent bill is a quid pro quo in a lot of ways.
2 things that really ring some bells about this whole thing is that when Jody was up there advocating, they had live hemp plants in the Capitol at one point, and Ron DeSantis made a point to say that cannabis should never be legalized because of the odor. It was such a horrible odor in the Capitol that day. And hemp smells the same way, guys.
Hashtag hold your nose and legalize it.
So hemp smells the same way. So I can't imagine he wants hemp to be legal as well, if he wants cannabis to be illegal. And second, if you, like you were saying about that veto, it's basically 2 pages of, we're gonna veto this, but you hemp guys, you stay in your lane. You make sure that we're gonna come back later. Like, they're basically saying we need to revisit this whole thing. We need to make sure that this business is regulated. In many ways, that's regulated in such a way that it's going to cause us to go out of business. So I don't trust Ron DeSantis. I don't think I'm going to throw my hat in the ring with him this time. And I'm going to be yes on Amendment 3.
Well, Carlos, we appreciate that. So, we've talked a lot about the history of how we got here. Now let's talk about the amendment itself. And I actually want to bring on Morgan Hill from the Yes on 3 campaign to introduce herself and share with us a little bit about, essentially what Smart and Safe Florida does and what Amendment 3 can accomplish for consumers in this state. Morgan, welcome to the town hall.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having me. It's good to be with you. As you said, I'm Morgan Hill. I am the spokesperson for Smart and Safe Florida, the political committee supporting Amendment 3 on the ballot this November. Amendment 3 to me can do a lot of things, right? I think it is a bill that will not only make marijuana legal in the state of Florida, so that we end the incarceration of individuals for small amounts of marijuana. But I think there's also a lot of tremendous economic benefit that it can bring the state. And on that, I actually want to call back to your point about medical marijuana and the medical marijuana program. And just note that, we are fully expecting that the two will coexist. And I think there are a lot of benefits for individuals to continue to have their medical marijuana cards. We've seen in other states how medical marijuana and recreational marijuana are existing at the same time, but that recreational will be taxed, whereas medical never will. So you will continue to be accessing your medical products at a lower cost for the individual. There are also often in the implementation processes a difference in potency added to recreational versus medical. So I think there are a lot of benefits to continuing to keep your medical marijuana card on top of those that were already mentioned. I think there's a lot we can talk about. I don't know if you want to fire questions or if there's more you want me to touch on.
Well, one thing before we go into the Q&A question from the public is in some of the comments that we had is, folks have a lot of questions as to how, possessing cannabis is going to work under the adult use system should Amendment 3 pass. I know there's a lot to be said about implementation, but could you give us a little bit more about, how it would work, as far as, folks having cannabis with them or on them should Amendment 3 pass?
Yeah, so the individual would be able to have up to 3 ounces at any time. I think from a regulation standpoint, we'll have to see what the legislature does, but the bill itself calls out that 3 ounce amount. I know you all mentioned home grow earlier. There are, a couple of pieces that I think we would all like to see be part of this. Retroactive decriminalization, I think, is another one. But I think it's a really important thing to understand that in the state of Florida, the Supreme Court requires that amendments are single issue. So had we coupled home grow with legalization or that retroactive decriminalization piece, we would never have gotten the amendment on the ballot. So the way we think about it is Amendment 3 is step 1. And then either through additional ballot measures or legislative process, we can add the retroactive decriminalization or the home grow. I like to think and both of those things.
Well, you bring up a great point in that we have to do so much more than just vote. We have to do more than just go to the ballot box. As Carlos touched on, you got to be engaged. And that's why organizations like the Florida Cannabis Action Network, Minorities for Medical Marijuana, and Suncoast NORML exist. We have a diverse membership among our various organizations, regionally, by demographic makeup. But the fact is that we all agree on one thing. People should not be locked up for having marijuana and for wanting to use it and live a healthy life. That all responsible users should have a safe, quality, and affordable access. So moving forward, we have a lot to engage our legislature on. If folks want to see home grow, then we got to engage the legislature on that. That they need to push for that. I'm glad that we have a candidate here this evening, in Teresa Wakefield Gamble, who supports making sure that the shortcomings of the existing system are addressed. And so, there is a lot to be said too about the partisan politics that dominate this state. For the since the 90s, Ron DeSantis and his political party have run Florida, and we haven't seen a consensus, if you will, on governing because of between gerrymandering and between the makeup of the state of how it's in the different municipalities. There seems to be islands of blue and large swaths of red. It's a microcosm, much in the way America votes, and that you have large cities that tend to be lean one political party, and then you have rural areas that tend to lean towards another political party. But there is a lot at stake in this election, not just here in Florida, but nationally, in regards to progress. I do want to touch on one clear thing: whether you like the candidates at the top of the ballot or not, whether you're a hardcore "Make America Great Again" Trump supporter, or you're a liberal Democrat and you want to see Vice President Harris be the first woman in history to become president, there is some clear things that are drawing the line. Some people give President Trump a lot of credit for the 2018 Farm Bill, in the sense that it did allow for hemp to become a legitimate industry in the state. But the Farm Bill itself is something that every president has to sign anyways, because it's what funds the Department of Agriculture. It has a lot to do with the food stamps that are there. So, you kind of get credit in a lot of ways for just going through the motions with that. But Vice President Harris, as a senator, was the only person that's running this race that sponsored the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, the MORE Act, which actually legalizes cannabis at the federal level. And with her recent pick of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, for the first time in history, you have a major political party where the two people at the top of the ticket support marijuana legalization and decriminalization. That is something to be said in regards to the dichotomy that we have in going to the ballot boxes election, which I point that out because Ron DeSantis knows that too. And Ron DeSantis knows that weed is more popular than him or his political party. And he fears the losses that they could have down ballot if they don't turn out hard, if they don't defeat Amendment 3. And Amendment 3 is not the only one on the ballot. All reproductive rights are also on the ballot in Florida in Amendment 4. So there's a lot to be said about the issues that are driving non-typical voters to get off the couch and go vote. And we know that marijuana is a big one, especially for millennials and Generation Z, making up now the largest voting block. For years, the baby boomers dominated the ballot box, but now Gen Xers, millennials, and Gen Z are really seizing power, and they have the ability as an electorate to go out there and change things significantly. Therese, I want to go to you real quick because there are some concerns folks have as to if things don't go our way, if Amendment 3 doesn't pass, if President Trump were to come back into power and this Project 2025 that we're all hearing about gets implemented, what would that mean for much of the criminal justice reforms that we've seen accomplished over the past decade?
Thanks for the question, Carlos. I have been hollering about Project 2025 for probably 2 years now, in my doctoral program. And what people need to realize, Project 2025 is not for certain things. It's everything that we know in a way of life. And the reason Governor DeSantis is pushing back on this Project 2025, because Florida is the pilot playground for 2025. And everybody in the nation is watching us. So the reason he's pushing back on legalizing marijuana and trying to make up all these excuses and getting all these people to fund against Amendment 3 is because they want to make Florida a law enforcement state. They want to eliminate anything with liberal policies that promote social well-being for people. I mean, they want to put this stronghold to control everything and make everybody think the conservative views the way they're thinking. And this is why we have to get up off the couch and we have to make them phone calls and have those hard conversations with our family members and our neighbors. That if we want to enjoy the freedoms we have and try to get medical marijuana into adult usage so we can be able to protect ourselves, those who carry guns, and to be able to maintain our health, we need to vote. Because if they get rid of Amendment 3 and all the other measures that we're trying to push, then we won't have a say. We won't have a life, and they will control everything we do, everything we say. We can sue all day long. But if we do not get the right people in office, real Democrats who really fight for real issues for people, not worrying about the wealthy and the rich. Yes, that monetary piece does come with cannabis, but that monetary revenue can be repurposed to come back to help the people. You got to remember, if you vote and you pay taxes in Florida, every Floridian has a right to demand growth in their community and a better quality of life. And if you don't realize that and you want to give it away, you cannot complain if you don't get up and go vote. If not, we're going to be living in a Project 2025 society. And that is not what I want. I don't want Trump back in office with him and his crazy cult people. And definitely, I am tired of Ron DeSantis because it's time for him to go. He is a puppet being played by the people in the supermajority of the Senate and the House. He's not doing anything. They're telling him what to do. And he's using Moms of Liberty to be his whistleblowers so he can come up with all this crazy legislation. So yes, this is very important. It's something serious, and we don't need to be sleeping on this election. You need to wake up. We need to get with Jody. We need to get with Ross. We need to back Morgan. We need to do the things we need to do because we are getting older, and our bodies need different methods of treatment than this hard prescription opioid that is very addictive and kills you slowly. So that is my position, Carlos. I'm really praying and fighting to make sure we do not go back into time and taking our children into an era and a lifetime that they have never experienced and do not navigate. And they're gonna be committing suicide because they're gonna be looking at us saying, well, why y'all ain't do nothing? Why y'all ain't say nothing? Why you didn't vote? I don't want to have that conversation with my children and my grandchildren, and none of you should either. So I am admonishing you, not just as a candidate, but as a mother, a grandmother, a business owner, and a black woman. Please get up off your couch. Make sure you get to the polls. Make sure you vote in all the elections. Make sure you vote down ballot. And make sure you join up and support these organizations on this live with me tonight. Because if not, you are not going to get the freedom and relief your body needs to be healed using cannabis.
Now, what you're saying, Therese, is that we're not going back. Is that what you're saying?
No, we are not going back when we vote. But if we don't vote, we going to go back. And I ain't trying to go back there.
Indeed.
No,
I
not
can't
trying to go
stress
back there.
what Therese just said is so important. I can't stress that enough. I get so frustrated when I hear criticisms about the amendment, and they're literally criticisms that we have been fighting and arguing and trying to get the legislator to do for years now, since medical marijuana started. There's no home grow. The business isn't open. I want to open a dispensary. Only one person's gonna. It is just absolutely frustrating to see people complain about this amendment that is only going to do good when what matters is who you vote for. What matters is who you put into office, because they're the ones that have the ability to change this right now. The amendment can only do one thing. It can only legalize marijuana. That's all it can do.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And, we actually have a candidate guide that'll be on our website tomorrow that you can check out. And it doesn't just have Democrats on there; it has Republicans as well, because the primary elections are going on right this minute. August 20th is the last day in Florida to vote in the primaries. So get out there. If you're a Democrat in the Jacksonville area, you got someone like Therese running for state representative. There are Republicans out there that are running for United States Congress that also want to see marijuana legalized. It is about getting the right people in office for these things. We've caught a lot of flack on this show from some of the viewers about feeling like we slant too far to the left sometimes. But the truth is that I reserve the right to criticize my own political party very heavily. And I think that folks should be involved in their own political parties, their own processes. If you're a Republican, if you're a Libertarian, get involved in your local party and get involved in state level politics and make the change. Roz, your organization does a lot for folks to get involved. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how folks can get more involved in advocating for cannabis consumer rights?
Well, let me just keep it real with you guys this evening. I'm actually reading all the comments, and my concern about some of the comments is that you're asking for things that justly and rightly should happen, but it does not happen by just sitting here and talking about it. If yes on 3 passes, it's then time to go to work. That's where the real work starts. You have people like Gary, you have people like Jody James, myself, so many folks are going to Tallahassee, but it's only a few of us. What needs to happen is more of taking this information and this in your passion that you're sharing, and you're typing in saying, I want home grow, I want this, and then taking it and meeting us in Tallahassee and meeting with lawmakers and being able to say, this is what we want, sending emails, doing an email campaign, doing call-ins or what have you. What we don't get enough of, and this happened with the medical program, because I was there, I was in Tallahassee every other week, is that we didn't have enough people fighting for to stop vertical integration. We didn't have enough people fighting for to reduce monopolization on the economic side. We didn't have enough people talking about social justice and social equity. So I will say this before I remove myself from this platform, that I'm so grateful to be here, is that if you don't show up, then you have no room to talk about it, to have issues with it, because the few of us, we cannot do it alone. We are so stretched. So if you can't be there, then donate to NORML, donate to Gary's PAC, donate to M4MM. But if you can't be there in person, and you don't have room to say what you want or say what you don't like, if you're not going to be willing to go and help us make the change in Tallahassee, because that's where it really starts. That's where the real work starts in. I encourage people, if you are not connected to M4MM, M4MMunited.org, join us. It's free. Freaking A. You don't have to pay a dime. And you don't have to be a minority. You don't have to be black. You don't got to be brown. You can be just someone who gives a crap about economic opportunity for everyone, that believes in social justice reform, that believes in economic, social equity. So I just encourage folks to get involved and not just on this platform typing out your thoughts. And that's I'll drop the mic.
No, appreciate it, Roz, and well stated. It's gonna be very difficult to follow that, but if anybody, Jody, I know you can follow up and tell folks how they can get involved. Your organization, for the better part of 3 decades, has been creating a space for folks in Florida to have their voice heard in Tallahassee. So tell folks a little bit how they can get involved with Florida Cannabis Action Network.
Well, I'm probably going to lose you in here in a second. My team's trying to get me back up. We left the bag at the straw pole that has the phone charger in it, God bless. But Florida Cannabis Action Network is everywhere. We're a statewide organization that's more than 25 years old. FLCAN.org is how you can get involved with us. And if you go to flcan.org/wevote, right now you can make sure that your voter registration is current. You can check out the deadlines, and you can click on our new candidate scorecard that we are putting together. It is something to check back every day because we're adding information. We have 20 years of data on these people who represent us, and I just left a candidate for him, and it was I'm done.
Well, Jody, is absolutely right. Get involved, get off the couch. Roz said it, definitely succinctly for all. You can become a member of Suncoast NORML. You can join with the members of Florida Cannabis Action Network. Check out Minorities for Medical Marijuana. Their link is in the chat there. All in all, I want to, take the time to say we're not going to see change in this state unless we, the people, step up and be that change. There is no magical billionaire coming to rescue us when it comes to criminal justice reform and when it comes to advocating for marijuana reforms. We exist as a membership-based organization, and we are definitely going to need all the help we can get moving forward in this coming legislative session to not only press on the implementation of Amendment 3, but to address those shortcomings that we've had for the past 7 years in the medical marijuana system. And so, Gary, I want to go back to you to talk a little bit about those shortcomings. I know you talked about worker protections. But we talked about gun rights. But there are other bills that you have drafted and that we've drafted as Suncoast NORML that address some of the shortcomings and many of the questions and comments that folks have around Amendment 3 that we've addressed as well. So tell the folks a little bit about that legislative agenda that you so handcraftedly and delicately put together.
Well, I got to tell you, every time that I work on a bill, and you have to work the bill to make it happen in Tallahassee. I don't just stop at going to Democrats, and I don't just stop or going to Republicans, because there are a lot of Democrats who are, I'm sorry to say it, Democrats in name only. I mean, look at Blue Jacksonville. I was just amazed that they had a candidate who, besides being semi anti-Semitic and saying, why should we talk about the Holocaust when the Jews have all the money? I don't even have 1/10 of the money, or even one fifth of the money. But she also said crazy things like, I thank God for slavery and things of that sort. And she also says, no way in regards to Amendment 3. And this is a Democrat talking. We have other Democrats who are talking in the Senate saying that if this goes through, there are going to be people eating out of trash cans. I mean, this is what we have. So know who the heck you're voting for. Make certain you learn who it is you're voting for, and know why you need to vote for them or vote or not vote for them. And we have a lot of legislation we have to pass. In order to do it, we need bipartisan support. I mean, we won that Amendment 2 back in 2016 with 71.3% of the vote. That's a bipartisan support. It can't possibly have all been coming from one party. Now, you don't see as much support from the Republicans, but in part that's because of the fact that in the legislature, it's very top-down organized. So they get calls from the executive branch that goes down and tells everybody on that side exactly how they should vote, what bills should go to committee and things of that sort. And yet there are Republicans who actually don't believe in the things that they're actually voting for or putting into committee or taking out of committee. And to them, I should say, if you go to Tallahassee and you meet one of those guys, tell them to do a ball check. That's basically what it comes down to, because they need to step up and let their true voice be heard and not just go with what leadership is saying. Yeah, it gets dangerous. I mean, look what happened to Brandis. He got kicked in the butt on the way out, but it's because of the fact he was tired of just falling through the Republican line. Now, in regards to the bills themselves, we need to make certain that we have employee protections. What Chris has been saying before. You shouldn't have to lose your job or not get a job because you have a medical card. Again, in regards to medical, you should not be kicked out of an institution like an ALF or a hospital or be taken off of the transplant list because you have a medical card. They still think, unfortunately, which is not true, that there's a less survivability when you're using cannabis if you have to get a transplant. It's the opposite. Because of the fact it's an anti-inflammatory, you actually get better chances for survival if you have a transplant and you're using cannabis. So let's go ahead and change those things. Another thing, they're always talking about parental rights. Parental rights. A lot of times they end up talking about parental rights. They're talking about parental rights to ban books. That is not really parental rights. That's teachers' rights to teach your kids the right thing. But what we really have to worry about is if you have a medical card for PTSD or something else that you have to treat, and once treated, you are a better parent, the Department of Children and Families can come to your house and petition to have your kids taken away. I just happened to write a bill that comes through and it says that the use of cannabis solely cannot be the reason for your kids being taken away. It makes perfect sense because the fact that you should be able to have your kids and your health at the same time. That's what it comes down to.
Gary, I want to stop you right there real quick because this actually got litigated differently in different states. In South Carolina, a woman had her child taken from her at the hospital, and in 4 years has not been able to see her child without supervised visits. Her mother actually had to get custody. In Oklahoma, a pregnant woman was recently vindicated because of the way the state wrote their law, and they said that she's not actually can be charged with child negligence for utilizing medical cannabis during her pregnancy for intractable nausea. So I'm glad that you brought this up about parental rights, because depending on what state you're in, you can lose your kids for being a medical marijuana patient. And as you said, in Florida, for some people, it's used against them in court. So thank you for your support on this bill.
Well, I also have a bill that was in regards to reciprocity. This may not be as much of an issue if we have Amendment 3 go through. The fact is, right now, if your grandmother is using this for Parkinson's and she comes to Florida and she doesn't have a medical card because she's not from this state, she could come on vacation and leave on probation. And that is just not right. We need to have full reciprocity here in the state. So if you have a medical card from another state, you should be able to use the medical product. And that means being able to buy without paying abnormal taxes on this adult use cannabis. That is just a fact. And they're actually looking forward to taxing it, I'm certain, over in Tallahassee, because I'm sure they want to use it for their other cultural issues, hopefully for education and things of that sort, but you never know. And we also have to make certain that we strengthen the medical program by making certain there are more qualifying conditions. And guys, if you have your medical card, be sure to keep your medical card, because again, you'll be exempt from all those taxes. And that'll be so important. And although we haven't got Morgan to talk about this right now, what I am seeing based on what has happened in other states is that once you have a recreational program, you'll probably see a THC cap on the adult use cannabis, in part because you can't make as much of an argument for higher THC when it's not having to do with medical use. So keep aware of that if you need the medicine that actually works for your particular infirmity, if you need higher THC or higher or CBN or CBG, then you need to make certain you have your medical card so you can get the correct amount, the correct cultivar. Don't call it a strain. Strains are for viruses. Call it a cultivar and make certain that you get the right kind of medicine. And of course, we also have a home grow bill because it's so important. Now, yes, there was an effort to put a ballot and a measure in for this particular election, but that didn't get nearly the amount of money that was necessary. That would come through. I mean, Smart and Safe Florida has made it very viable that if you want to have a ballot initiative, you've got to put in millions and millions of dollars, and that's what they have done. But millions and millions of dollars did not go into the home grow bill, and that's in part one of the reasons that it didn't go through. The other part of the fact is, most likely, if you have adult use, it'll be easier to get home grow because it'll be easier in regards to being able to work with it on a street level, because you have to be able to enforce these kind of things. Well, the bill that I wrote actually makes it so that if you are a home grow patient, they will know how much you harvest and how much you have grown, so they know that you're not giving it out to the kids on the street, which is the big question they have over in Tallahassee. Of course, it's a fallacy, but it's one of those situations.
Well, Gary, let's go to that real quick, because I know some of the folks watching may be in the no column because they're worried about the kids. If you go to normal.org, each and every week, our staff at the National NORML office are putting together the latest in research around cannabis. And one of the studies that just came out in the last week was data provided by the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration on the most recent national survey on drug use and health. And it actually found that a nearly 20% decline in teen marijuana use over the past decade. Over the past decade, where we've legalized adult use in this country, in the various states, we've seen teen rates go down. So when we talk about, is it going to be safe for the kids? The answer is yes. Having a regulated adult use market where only people 21 and up can get access to this is going to put out of business a lot of folks that still participate in the illicit market. Because why would you want to go to someone who doesn't necessarily know where they get their bud from, who doesn't necessarily know if it's safe, if it's been tested? And so that having a safe and tested quality place that you can go to is the main concern. Again, as consumers, we also have to make sure that we're advocating for those testing controls, that we're advocating to make sure that there aren't certain pesticides sprayed on our medicine. So it is vital that we continue, as we said, to get involved. Also looking at what we're seeing in regards to people worrying about Ron DeSantis saying, oh, everything's going to smell like weed. Well, there's actual direct correlation to municipalities that legalize it and your proximity to cannabis dispensaries and your home values going up. You can go on to normal.org and see that research as well. all in all, what we see now is that the American College of Physicians, we're seeing that the American Nursing Associations are all coming out and asking the federal government to decriminalize cannabis. In many ways, the last 80 plus years of prohibition has not worked in this country, and the Controlled Substances Act, with cannabis being Schedule 1, has been an absolute disaster. We're finally starting to see progress with this current administration, and if things go a certain way in this upcoming election, we may see even more progress with another administration. We're having a president and vice presidential candidates being in favor of legalizing it. But again, we're here tonight talking about Amendment 3, what it will do here in Florida. And again, the arrests that we've seen in this state, especially the felony arrests for having more than 20 grams or any amount of concentrate, have been a major, detriment to folks who are Floridians. The war on drugs is the longest running war in this country's history, and it's on the American people. Mic drop. There's nothing else to really say about that, except that it's the longest running war and it's on us, the people. And so if we want to see these things happen, we need to put the right people in office. It has been said time and time again. We're going to flash now on the screen NORML's endorsements for this primary. And so if you're going to take to the ballots now, early voting has already begun. Go online to your local supervisor of elections office and find your nearest early voting site. Cast your ballot now. If you have a vote by mail ballot, understand that Ron DeSantis wanted to crack down on that. So each and every election now, you have to request a vote by mail ballot. These are for Florida elections here. You got a state attorney race where there's a primary in the 13th Circuit here in the Tampa Bay area. Andrew Warren is who we supported in 2016, and it's who we're supporting again. In the Orlando area, you have the public defender seat, and in the Tampa Bay area, public defender seats open. Lenora Easter and Rocky Brancato are the candidates that we want to see there. With the Florida State Senate candidates, in particular, up north in Florida District 2, you have Daryl Parks. In Florida District 25, which is in the Orlando area, Carmen Torres, who's the wife of Victor Torres, who was the senator that sponsored the legalization bill for us. Rodney Jacobs, who you've seen on the show here on the rotation. You can go back and watch past episodes and hear from him. And in the Florida State House in the Jacksonville area, Angie Nixon, who's an incumbent facing a primary that actually sponsored our worker protection bill. Of course, Teresa is here with us this evening, and she's actually, running against that crazy incumbent that Gary touched on earlier, who was against Amendment 3, and thank God for slavery. So, there is definitely some candidates out there. Also, Ashley Brundage, who was on the show this past Sunday in District 65 here in the Tampa Bay area. These are some great folks that are running for state office. And then for your federal offices, this past Sunday, Debbie Mercursa Powell came on the show and told us how she felt. Maxwell Frost has been on the show many, many times. Sabrina Bruce Barr was on the show last month. Isan Jordan is a Republican running in Florida's 14th district who wants to become the Republican candidate to take on Kathy Castor. We'll make our endorsements in the general based on candidates, but we're telling you, we're not just all leaning to the left. There are Republicans out there who are also for reform, and they're here on our list here. You want to go ahead and step out, and if you're a Republican, vote for these folks in those primaries. In Florida 16th, there's a Democratic primary. Trent Miller put it right on his website. He's for legalizing at the federal level, and he wants to be the candidate in Congress from that district to do it. In Florida's 23rd district, Darlene Swafar is a Republican running who is also in favor of decriminalization and legalization. In Florida's 25th district, Jen Perlman, who's running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who has never been a fan or a supporter in this state for marijuana consumers, is running for Congress against her in the primary and in his support of legalizing it. And then Mike Davey in Florida's 27th district, who filled out his normal questionnaire and had all the right answers. And so these are the candidates that are running for office that have either participated on the show, have filled out their questionnaires, they've been there. We know where they stand on these issues, and this will be posted on our website tomorrow. But we wanted to share this early release with you all, so that way, as you take to the primaries, you know which candidates are the ones that are supporting this. So let's talk a little bit about Amendment 3 and field some of these questions that we've seen on the chat as we have these last 10 minutes of the show here. Carlos, if you can pull up maybe some of these questions here that we're seeing into the chat and flash them on the screen, we can address them a little bit one by one. So Let's see here, and we're going to try and pull up some of these comments and questions here that are essentially PG. Some folks, they feel kind of strongly in their wording. It's okay. I mean, freedom of speech.
I mean, if I'm gonna go through the comments that they're the ones that aren't PG. The first one, I mean, this one seems to not really understand the difference between federal laws and state law.
Well, let's pause on that. What did President Biden do? President Biden is the first president to issue out over 6,500 pardons for cannabis offenses.
Right.
And Vice President Harris actually hosted folks who received those pardons at the White House at a roundtable. One of them happened to be a normal member to talk about it. And Vice President Harris has said, people shouldn't be locked up for marijuana. And again, she was the only person that we've seen running that actually sponsored the MORE Act to legalize cannabis in Congress. So there's a lot to be said as to who's doing what. Now, how do we feel about Trulieve sponsoring and bankrolling Amendment 3? If it passes, Trulieve would appear as a company in the Florida Constitution, according to DeSantis. Are people worried? Look, as Gary touched on, there was a home grow amendment that wanted to support medical home grow in this state, and it didn't have any financial backing. Trulieve, yes, has dumped a lot of money into getting behind Amendment 3 and Smart and Safe Florida. Obviously, they have the biggest benefit, if you will, to an adult use system because they have the most storefronts in the state out of the MMTC. But what we need in this state is to end marijuana arrest. And that's what Amendment 3 is going to do, is end tens of thousands of arrests for marijuana in this state. And it's going to make a big difference in how we can, one, strike down vertical integration. Many of the criticisms that I myself has had against Trulieve have been due to the fact that the vertical integration system has limited competition. Well, I would love to see more competition to make them produce better products and to make them be a better organization and a better business. And so I think that's the most important takeaway of having a robust adult use and robust medical marijuana system is we got to get the right people in the legislature to knock down vertical integration to make more competition. The qualifying conditions is a major issue that folks have. In the state, in Washington, D.C., senior citizens actually can self-certify. They can walk into a dispensary and say, hey, I have a medical condition and I need it, rather than spending hundreds of dollars on a doctor's recommendation. The whole issue of how the doctor recommendations came about and the certification for doctor's recommendation, again, was due to certain legislators being influenced by certain doctors to write the test a certain way, to make the doctor certifications a certain way. And there have been powers that be that want to get a cut, essentially. Now, there are some great doctors out there that do right by their patients. Dr. Barry Gordon, who's been a friend of this show and been on many times, who has actually argued before many different courts for his patients and such. So there are great doctors out there. As a matter of fact, if you go on our website, you can go to suncoastnorml.org. We have the opportunity for you to engage with some doctor clinics out there that can get you a doctor's recommendation, in addition to our partners at Medical Marijuana Awareness Webinars, who host educational webinars each and every week for folks who have those chronic debilitating conditions. And maybe you want to learn a little bit more about how your condition can be affected by medical cannabis. And so there's a great opportunity there for you to be able to do that. So check out our website at suncoastnorml.org. We're more than happy to help. So let me see, Carlos, you got any other comments? THC caps came up about in the comments. THC caps probably, as Gary pointed out, they may be sleeping right now. They may be dead and gone, but they can come back like a zombie in many ways, and especially with an adult use system, which is why it's going to be important for you as advocates to go out there and advocate in the Florida legislature, not just this session, but subsequent sessions to prevent THC caps from popping up. So
this is honestly we're actually broadcasting live on this channel. I'll go ahead. I understand that you may be tired from the event here and answering questions, so I'll go ahead and answer this one. We're broadcasting on this channel, and apparently they're also no on 3. So how can we support the amendment when Trulieve, who is spearheading this amendment, is lobbying to make their competitors felons across the country? They just lobbied to make hemp and CBD a felony in Florida. As a store owner that sells hemp products, I think I'm qualified to answer this question. And the truth is I want to be able to sleep at night. If I'm able to be in business for the next 2 years, that would be great. But if I'm in business, and that means that the other option is that, what is it, 50,000 people get arrested every year in this state, right?
It's tens of thousands of people get arrested in Florida.
It's not as much as 50,000, but it's still a lot of people get arrested in the state for cannabis. And I've been advocating for the legalization of cannabis for years now. It's not legal. People are still getting arrested for it. That's what that means. And we need to make that change. And although it would severely hurt my business, I don't want to hurt other people. So I'm going to be yes on 3, and I am going to work to make sure that my business still does as well, and hopefully it still works. But whatever.
Well, I do want to do this one thing. I don't want to give Trulieve more credit for being an evil corporation than what they already do. Okay, and the fact is that corporations can only do what they're enabled to do by the political system. All right. Citizens United before the Supreme Court allowed corporations to spend an unlimited amount in our political system. The Roman Empire fell because of corruption and money in politics. And the American Empire is on the verge of that too, because we have too much money and too much corruption in our politics. And so there is a lot to be said as to what you can do to fight back, because oftentimes the chips are stacked against the little guy. All we really have is our power at the ballot box. All we have is our power together, joined in solidarity together. And so that's why we ask for organizations like the partners we have with Minorities for Medical Marijuana for you to get involved. Dana's on, who's the secretary of the Florida Cannabis Action Network. Dana, why don't you tell folks about how they can get involved with Florida Can before we wrap up this evening?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having Florida Can on with you today. We're always excited to further the conversation around education. I know that Jody lost her internet. Look, the internet's back. So I was really just stepping in to say a few words about that. You can find us on flcan.org/join to become a member, and just learn more about us in general, as well as going to that fldecides.com to learn about your candidates, hoping to grow the vote. It is more important than ever, as many of us have echoed on this call, that we vote the right people into office, because as much as Yes on 3 is going to do for us, our politicians are going to continue to do more if we vote the right ones in. So I'm really glad that you guys are working on that end as well, also putting out those candidate scorecards. So between the two of us, hopefully we have a good number of accurate scorecards.
Well, yeah, and that's a good point. National NORML has a scorecard. You can go to National NORML's website and go to normal.org. You can check out the Smoke the Vote section, the election central headquarters, and see the different scorecards for various candidates. And like I said, we as a Suncoast chapter have put out endorsements based on what we've seen with folks participating with us as a chapter, based on what we've seen them on the campaign trail, their various stances, and how they filled out the questionnaires. And so, not every race had an endorsement, because not every race has a competitive primary. But again, we will have a general election scorecard that'll come out once these primaries conclude here after August 20th. But for right now, again, I want to say check out our website tomorrow, normal.org. Carlos, if you want to flash those graphics one more time so we can just touch base on what candidates that we know are supporting us and supporting cannabis consumers here in the Tampa Bay area. Again, we got a state attorney's race with Andrew Warren. We got 2 public defender races, one in Orlando, one in the Tampa Bay area. You got Lenora Easter and Rocky Brancato. And with the state Senate races, again, you got all across the state, whether it's up north, Central Florida, or South Florida. You got candidates Daryl Parks, Carmen Torres, Rodney Jacobs. In the Florida State House, there's 2 very competitive primaries right now on the Democratic side. In Florida's 13th district and Florida's 14th district, Angie Nixon, who sponsored our worker protection bill in the past, and of course Teresa Wakefield Gamble, who has joined us this evening. Get out there and support her in that primary. And of course Ashley Brundage, who was on the rotation just this past Sunday here in the Tampa Bay area. And then when you look at the federal races, Debbie Mercasa Powell is the Democrat we feel that would be the best one to take on Rick Scott in general election, especially after you can hear her comments on this past week's rotation. And of course Maxwell Frost, who's been on the show many times, and you can check out past episodes with him. Sabrina Bousbar, who is on the rotation last month. And then, of course, we have these other candidates who have filled out their normal questionnaire or have taken very positive stances in regards to wanting to be the members of Congress to legalize it. So again, this primary election guide will be on suncoastnormal.org tomorrow. So you can go ahead, take a look at it, print it out, share it with family and friends, and make sure that when you go to the polls this August 20th, and remember, August 20th is the last day to vote. Right now, you can go and knock out your early votes, or you can request a vote by mail ballot, and you can knock that out as well. But again, vote in your primaries because they're so vitally important, putting the right people in office. So that way in the general election, we can make sure that we elect the right people to represent us in government. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. We have reached our time. I want to say again, if you want to get involved, if you want to be a part of what we got going on, suncoastnormal.org. We are your national organization for the Reform Marijuana Laws chapter here in Florida that is working to make sure that you're educated on the latest of cannabis policy developments. Again, we want to encourage everyone to go out there, vote yes on Amendment 3. We do want to end cannabis arrests in the state of Florida, and we understand that this is the first step